giggling and laughing at the funeral. So it's that. It's where the energy inside of you has to come out, and it can come out in different and surprising ways. And that they're having, and that it's so big that the resources they have and the skills they have to regulate those feelings, they can't handle the intensity of what's happening inside of them. That's when kids need to be pulled away from whatever is creating that intense feeling. It's going down. With kids, you always want to try to go down to their eye level. John, sit on your bum. But the best you can, you want to meet them where they are. There's a great statue outside the Calgary Board of Education where they created these really tall statues so that adults can feel what it's like to be a child looking up. And I think I always remember that. So go down where you are, calm, steady voice. So you need to help. You need to help be the extra regulation that they need. So you're creating an environment that's calm and stress-free. You're not, so you're trying not to be triggered by their, silliness and goofiness. And it's a hard line, it's a hard thing to figure out sometimes because camp's fun. So there are times when it's going to be silly. It's when it doesn't fit with what you would expect or what's happening or what you know of the camper, right? And it doesn't mean it's not okay, and we'll normalize that for the kids. And a lot of kids carry a lot of guilt about things like giggling at the funeral. So it can be the silly or the hyper. And we've seen a lot of the hyper at camp when we're doing some of the rituals. And again, it's regulating it, and it's giving them language. Like, I wonder if there's, all of these feelings that you're feeling and the things that you're hearing and the memories are just kind of filling you up, and it's a bit too much, so your energy's got to come out somehow. So why don't we do this to help your body get rid of some of the energy and let them know, and it's okay. That happens to me sometimes, or whatever. And we invite and choose volunteers that we feel confident, can think on your toes and be creative. And so we encourage you to do that. The things that we have for you are, aside from the policies, are guidelines and ideas. But no one's gonna, you're our eyes and ears, and no one's gonna know the campers as well as the two buddies that are with them are. So we really depend on you to trust your skills and your intuition. And when you come to us, we might say, well, what do you think? Like, tell me about the camper. What's worked? What hasn't worked? What have you tried? Right? So it's a partnership, and we need you to know that we value what you bring and the knowledge you have of your campers. Do you want to say anything about dysregulation? This has become more common. I think a lot of people talk about this, and that's wonderful, especially with parenting. There's difference between a feeling and a behavior. So a feeling is never bad. A behavior is an expression of a feeling, and there's helpful behaviors and not helpful, and harmful and not harmful. So first things first, with a behavior, if it's a safety issue, then it needs to stop, and we'll talk a bit more about how to be proactive and how to redirect and how to discipline. But to remember to be very careful about how is what I'm saying going to be received and internalized by my camper. And to spend some time thinking about that before you come to camp. We have this opportunity, we have with access to these kids to fill them with a reserve of things they can pull on to build self-esteem and confidence and skills. We talk a lot, our other goal is to really have the kids go home with skills they didn't have before that will make them more able to cope in life. Because we know that this is, you don't just have one bad thing happen in life. Bad things happen all the time. Some are bigger and some are small. But the better you are able to cope with the hard things in life, we know the better that you will be able to navigate and find a healthy, happy place in life. So just be really careful to not say, you're bad, or that was a bad thing. So that wasn't a very helpful thing, or that looks like that's harmful for Sam that you're sitting on. And I mean, perfect? Absolutely not. And things are going to slip out, and don't beat yourself up. But just try to talk about it, understanding that there's usually a feeling behind it, whether it's, you know, feeling left out or feeling insecure or feeling angry that this happened in your life.
The only thing I would add is that for most of you in the room who, if you've been counselors, and we get a fair amount of grief counselors who have been counselors in the other camps, what is unique and also difficult about our camp is we have a very small period of time. So if I was a counselor at another camp and I had the kids for a month or I had kids for 2 weeks, I could work that experience and that relationship in a very different way. So we really are throwing counselors and campers into a very unique situation where we don't have as much time as in other camps to work those relationships. That being said, also in other camps, the regular camp that you might go to in the summer, they have ways of working discipline that we can't. They have ways of working pranks and fun stuff that we can't. So we're unique in that we have 3 days. We want to we don't want any child to have to go home. If that ever happened, that would have to happen. But that is not what we want. But we do have to move in fast and work on behaviors more quickly than you might have to do if you're in your average summer camp.
You talk about pranks. So no pranking. We know that it's one of my favorite memories of being a camper, but we just, like Nancy said, we don't have the time, and we have a vulnerable population. So we don't want to take the risk of things going wrong or someone feeling left out or hurt, or no swirlies, no toilet papering, nothing.
And some of the kids have
Pal
been
is
to camps and
swirlies
want
when you
it.
put a kid upside down in the toilet and you flush.
None of that.
Really?
Not
That's my Alberta history. There's lots of swirlies at my camp. So no pranking. And your kids are good, like, it's mostly happened, sorry, but in the boys. And you'll just have to be the tough guy and say, nope, sorry, can't happen.
And again, the 7, 8, 9, 10.
Again, then we're going to tell people they're on that group.
Who's on that group?
We haven't told them yet.
Okay. No, they're a wonderful group. It's just that they do lean more towards
They have high
friends.
energy.
They have high energy.
So the 3 C's is something that's been identified through research of the things that kids tend to think about and worry about the most around death and dying. This is what, when we're talking to a caregiver and they're newly bereaved or in a stressful situation where the person is dying and they can barely remember anything, this is what we ask them to keep in mind that is going on for their kid. So cause, kids think a lot, and I think something that caregivers don't realize, or sometimes adults don't realize, is that they think about it on an ongoing basis. They revisit how the death happened and what could have been done differently, and what did I say, what did I do, could I have prayed more, could I have, raised, I was working with a kid once who was 100% confident, and he was 13 years old, that if he could just do one of the walks or runs for cancer, and if he could just raise enough money, that his mom would get better, because the commercial said, help us find a cure for cancer. And so kids spend quite a bit of time revisiting the time of the death and trying to think, what could have been different to make things different. Some kids very easily can tell you that they think that. Some kids who've had counseling and support and discussions might tell you that they do understand that there was nothing they did or said or didn't do, or that caused the death. I think there's always, and I'd love to hear Chris's thoughts too on this, and Nancy, but I think there's always a seed of that in every bereaved heart, adult and child. Right? Because it just doesn't, there's no fairness in death when your person dies, and there's just this need for it to make sense. We're cognitive beings as well as emotional, and so I think that the more that kids can hear, and the more that you can share, that's something that I thought once, and then I realized that That's not true. That, just because I told my dad that I hated him, when we had a fight before he had the car accident. Or, and for some kids, the relationship is actually quite strong. So, we had a fight and then Dad went off on his motorcycle and then he crashed and he died. So you can't, it's something that you're going to make yourself available to talk through. Tell me a bit more about that. How do you deal with that when you feel that way? And that life is very complex and there's no way, we can't go back and there's no way to know, and it doesn't help for anyone to be blamed about things or to feel responsible. But, for some kids that it's going to be a lot more work for them to find a way to let go a little bit of feeling responsible. But it's about being available and being supportive. Catch. So even though we're not in a palliative situation where, if it was a medical death and that's not, present in the home to be caught, kids learn a lot at school. They're learning all the time about the relationship between our body and our environment and about genetics. So it's not uncommon for kids to feel like, and I would feel confident to say that it's almost universal, and it's about catching death. You experience death and you feel death and you feel like it's something that can happen to you or the people you love. Right? I talked about that a little bit more. So kids think about that a lot, and kids do worry, and we do an activity. If we have time, we'll talk a bit more about it. So Dr. Chris and Dr. Hal and Dr. Hannah will be answering kids' questions alongside one of the counselors. So they have an opportunity to ask any question anonymously. And that's where we do hear a lot of the cause theme come out. If I, then would he have. And we do hear volunteers come back and say, yeah, that really came up in our conversations.
I just want to add that sometimes in that ask the doctor, or even in the cabins, the tricky ones are the ones where, it's all tricky, but the ones where you find the kids are really struggling might be about lung cancer and smoking, and so it's always multi-layered. But if you feel that they're posing a question or phrasing in a way that you're feeling comfortable, or you just feel like it's okay to say, that's a really good question. Let me go and find somebody that can talk with both of us about it, or about the kids in the cabin or whatever. Because they do sometimes give all of us, no matter how much we do this work, something that comes up and you think, oh, Heather, where's Heather? I would like Heather here right now. So, and that's okay. We can pause and we can go back and say, yeah, we're going to come back to that. Because their minds just are going all over the place. The kids are just incredible and just, going all over the place. And so sometimes you do need that extra support.
And it's good for you guys to have as a reference that when we ask the doctor questions, we've spent hours debating and figuring out how to answer those questions. So it's not that there's a clear or right answer. It's about, we'll talk a bit more about communication and questions, and sometimes questions aren't about what we think they're about, and, sometimes, so, just know that it's not, even people that do this all the time have to, we're always thinking about how do we help communicate that, how do we help a child understand us better or feel more comfortable about what's happened in their life, if we can. And sometimes there's, even at Ask the Doctor, sometimes there isn't an answer to that question. It's a mystery, and we use that word a lot. It's a mystery. It's one of those things in life that we just don't know. We can't study it, and it's something that will always be a mystery. And that's one of those things is spirituality, and we'll touch on that a bit more. Care is really big, so that happens when there's an expected death, and that it's really important for kids to feel that they have a role. And that they're able to be part of the care team for the person who's dying, even if it's as little as being the person that, the kid that always brings the water, or keeps the dog quiet, or whatever. There's some strength that's drawn from that, knowing that you helped and that you took care of your person. But it extends to after, and there's a lot of exploration and a lot of talk about how we care for the dying. And I think that Camp Erin is one of those ways. And we're trying to help kids explore how they will care for that person moving forward in life, how they will speak about them, how they will remember them, how they will protect special things of theirs, how they will be different in life because they were so-and-so's sister or dad or daughter or whatever. So there's a lot of hope in that, because a lot of kids feel like, and maybe getting the messaging that it's over, they're gone, let go and get over it. And that's the opposite of the message that we want them to get and that they need to hear. Because they're never going to get over it. It's never going to be over in their life. It's going to influence their entire life, and it's going to peak over and over again for them in life, just like it does for us. You know, it's going to peak on Father's Day, and it's going to peak on birthdays, and it's going to peak at graduations, or, you know, when we usually went on our fishing trip. Or so it's conversations about, you know, how would it feel good? When do you feel close? What could you do to make sure other people know about how awesome your person was? You know, those conversations are really important, and the message that there are ways that you keep caring for the person, because a body's not here, but a relationship, and a spirit or a soul or an essence lives on in hearts and stories and in so many ways. And that's a hopeful message, you know, that we can give to teachers. How am I doing for time, Jordy? I always go over on this.
Yeah, getting close. Great.
Keep going.
Okay.
I love this friend. He has such great energy. So if you're feeling nervous, don't feel alone. There's still days when I walk into a house where I get butterflies. But it's the only way that you're going to become more comfortable is by getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So this is hard stuff, and it's one thing to sit here and talk about it, but when, you know, you've got those precious, honest, vulnerable eyes looking at you, and you're feeling their pain and you're in it with them, it's hard. It's hard. And that's human, and it's okay, and it doesn't mean that you're not a good volunteer or not a good whatever person or human. It means that it's hard because it is hard, and it's uncomfortable because these things shouldn't happen in life, but they do. So just to feel comforted by the fact that we all feel uncomfortable, but the more you do it, and I think you would hear this from returning volunteers, you do build confidence because you can see that you being okay to be uncomfortable and to meet that kid where they are and be present with them, it helps. And when you get that behind you, that helps you feel more confident to move forward and engage more and know that you have so much to offer these kids and that it's worth the discomfort. And so I think we've already touched on it's okay not to have the answer. Kids love it when you don't have the answer. It's like, awesome, you're an adult and you don't know. And to highlight when they do, wow, you know, you understand that a lot better than I do. Can you tell me that again? Can I tell another kid that was a great way of explaining it? How did you think of it that way? You know, just really, and they do. And we're always writing down the way kids explain things, because that's why camp's good, because they're so much better at explaining children's grief than I am. Or, you know, right? They get it. And wonder with them, so that's the mystery thing. So, sorry, I should have reviewed a bit more of what you're doing. Do we talk about spirituality? So, can you take this one over break?
Yes. Okay.
You feel?
Yeah. So if you think that all of the kids that are on camp are coming from very different family situations, could be religious and cultural beliefs. So what can happen is that you might have two kids in the moment wondering about God and wondering about where the body goes or where is their mother or father. And you have children who have, from at home, who have had very different conversations about spirituality, about religion. So it isn't for any of, and I know we're telling you things you already know, but we're trying to pull it together, because when you do get to camp, it gets, a lot of things are happening really fast, a lot of situations are arising. But it's okay in those situations where your cabin that you're with are having conversations about God.